Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day, there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to deviate just a little bit from this because we're going to be talking about leadership. And leadership doesn't always tie into success, right? Somebody might think they're really successful, but they're not a good leader. Or the other way around. But in many cases, you do need to be both. So we're going to have a great time talking with my guest today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Nate Salah to our program today. Welcome, Nate. How are you?
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you for having me, Deb.
I love it. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this. So Dr. Nate Salah is a lifelong entrepreneur, award-winning university educator, and advisor to entrepreneurs. He is the founder of Salah Financial Group, Great Summit Leadership, and host of the podcast, A Call to Leadership. Oh my gosh, such a short bio, but there's so much great information about you. So tell us a little bit more about how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, what a great question to kick it off, Deb. Well, I'm a son of immigrants,
Okay.
and my family came here for the better life, right? For the American dream, if you will. And so I grew up in that environment, very entrepreneurial family.
Okay.
So a lot of merchants. And so I was always as a youth working in different businesses, whether it was a pet shop or a bakery or a convenience store or so on. And by the time I got to college age, I was actually so sick of business that I enrolled not in business, but the philosophy department. I thought, what is the furthest thing from
right?
So I started my journey as a philosopher. And then as I was in that program, I realized that I couldn't figure out what was wrong with the world until I could figure out what was wrong with me. So I changed my major to psychology. And then I found out that neither of them paid anything. So I came full circle and I got a business degree. So
because you grew up with that. You weren't getting away with it.
It was in the blood. And so I actually dropped out of college when I was 21 to become a millionaire, to pursue entrepreneurship. Because, back in the day, we're talking about the 90s here. And you think about all the entrepreneurs who were doing that, the Steve Jobs,
the dot-com boom,
Bill Gates, all those guys were, they were like, hey, and they were massively successful. I realized it was very difficult to just go into the trenches and learn from the school of hard knocks. And so through that journey, I really began to develop a heart for the entrepreneur, for the business owner, for someone who, and not only that, for all the team members, everyone who's involved in this process of creating an experience that is attractive, worthwhile, and achievable. And so I then began really pursuing that. Now, of course, I've had my accounting and business advisory and firm for many, many years. And of course, we do all kinds of other things too, leadership development for entrepreneurs. And it's become very rewarding over the years as I've learned to hone that and help them to achieve both on the financial side and on the leadership side, marrying those two pieces to be effective leaders. Yeah, so
I love it.
It's been quite a journey.
And it's so interesting because I think when we see that people kind of have this mix, that's where they do so well. How many times did we start off in one college path and go a different way?
Oh yeah. And I say this, I mean, this is, we're talking 30 years now here since I started back in 95, I started the business. The aspects of philosophy and psychology actually flow very well into business.
Definitely.
Because we need to understand human behavior, and a lot of economics is really the study, the economic study of human behavior. So I agree, and that's a good point to make, especially for a listener who's like, oh my goodness, I've been on this path and I'm going to transition to another business path. Is it even relevant? Yes, I believe so. I believe you can take all your experiences you've had in one area, and perhaps it's not applicable to a task per se, or specific skill, but business is so much broader than that, and the relationships and how I've learned to cultivate those, how I've learned to create a legacy for myself and my reputation, that can spill over into any industry.
Right. And I love that you talk about legacy and reputation and things like that, because so many people don't think about those when they're thinking about business. When I was thinking about, preparing for this, they think the only thing that you worry about is more money, more money, more money, right? And what people don't understand is that the more money comes when you have great business practices.
Indeed. Yeah, I learned that. I learned that some time ago. When I first started, I wanted to, I saw the dollar signs. Let's just be transparent. And then most young entrepreneurs, or starting entrepreneurs,
Right.
not everyone's young, but starting entrepreneurs say, dollar signs.
Right.
And so
we have bills to pay.
bills to pay. And so, however, as I developed, what I discovered, and to your point, is that if I can provide value in the marketplace, that value translates into dollars. And so the exchange happens. And oftentimes, we look at business often as adversarial, because you're trying to take something that belongs to me. Sales, right? If we're talking about, let's just talk about sales for a moment. So, you've been through the mall, and you've walked down the aisle, and you see the folks who are in the center stack with their kiosk, and they want to perhaps sell you some lotion or something like that. Most people, as I've had conversations, and I ask them what they do, they say, well, they try not to give eye contact because they want to
right, yes,
go around them, because they say, well, I don't have the time, or I don't know. And because people don't like to be sold, but they love to buy. And so to become the kind of person who is valuable and important and needed, then will eventually translate to the mo money. But the mo money is not, it's the byproduct. And I think it was said like this, that profit is the applause that you receive from your customer, right, for doing great work.
I love that. And it is the case where we do get caught up in the dollar signs and the beat the other guy type of thing. And and often what happens is our employees and the people we are working with pay that price. And I think that's obviously one of the biggest tragedies, because it's kind of like the saying, happy wife, happy life, right? If your employees, your consultants, your whoever's, vendors, all of those things, if they're happy, then it's going to help you be more successful in business.
Agreed. Yeah. And I tend to look at it more like the holistic approach, and as you've described, in that, this is a collective. The entire business experience is a collective, and all the stakeholders, your suppliers, your clients, your team members, the marketplace as a whole. Even in some senses, I would, years ago, here, let me just back up a second. I've taught at university for many years, and I used to teach a class about competitive advantage, talking about competition, beating the other guy, if you will. And it was called The Quest for Competitive Advantage, is what the text was called. And for many years, as I taught that, I grappled with this idea of competition, in that, do we really have to compete for the same dollar, or would we then be better served if we said, hey, you know what, you're not my competition, you're my colleague.
Right.
You are someone who perhaps provides a different service that's a different fit for a different client. So I want a best fit for me, and I want you to have a best fit for you.
Right.
And if there's someone who's not a best fit for me, I'd love to send them your way. And that creates I believe, greater collaboration than competition, because I believe that if we just focus on beating the other guy, I think we're looking at it from a scarcity mindset. If we're
definitely,
hey, let's work all together to serve well, then we're looking at an abundance mindset. And I think that abundance perspective is really much more attractive in the grand scheme of things, because there is really an opportunity to serve to serve more generously in when we're looking at that way. But the problem does arise. You say, well, hey, what about again profit? I have to make money.
Right.
You absolutely have to do that. That has to be part of the cash and flow are probably the two most important words in any budget conversation with a business. However, those are lagging indicators of how well you're serving.
Right. Right. And you talk about scarcity, and that that's one of those things where the customer then has a totally different view of you when you are in that scarcity mindset, because they know you're desperate, right? They know that you're going to knock the price down. They know they're going to be able to get a deal, all of these things. And then nobody is concerned about giving the best product or service. And do we really want to do that? It's funny. I have a brother-in-law who we joke that he has the first quarter that he ever made still clenched tightly in his hand, right? And years ago, he was at our house doing something, around the house, helping with a project, sends me off to Lowe's to get the parts. I come back, I give him the parts. And he says, how much did you pay? And I told him, and he says, you should have dickered. I'm like, I was at Lowe's, and he snipped at me enough that I looked at my husband and I said, that's the last time I do that. It was like, why, they asked a fair price. I was going to give them the fair price. Now there are obviously times when we do dicker. I just booked a cruise. I dicker on that, right? Now, what can you give me? But those are things they already planned on. I wasn't pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. And it was kind of a fun process. But yeah, the scarcity mindset just leads to desperation.
Yeah. And I think that also goes back to your initial comment about reputation. And our reputation is also a reflection. It's a byproduct. I think we have to start with what we believe as leaders, as business people.
Right.
And so our beliefs will ultimately shape our values. And really our values are what's important to us. And then our values will then shape our behavior, because what we value is what we pursue.
Right.
No more, no less. And then our values, which are the outpouring, if you will, then will determine from our behavior really what our reputation is. And so if we have and of course then our reputation actually becomes our brand, by the way. So if we develop a reputation for fairness, and say we will provide you with fairness, honesty, integrity, transparency in the relationship, so that we don't have to haggle. We don't have to come up with anything other than what we've agreed to, because this is the best possible arrangement. People will learn that that's your reputation, and that you stick by it. Now, that doesn't mean, look, I come from a family from the Mediterranean. Everything was a haggle. Like I had to actually learn to unhaggle over time, as so much. Even my wife would say, did you get over on that person? Like, no, I just got a great deal. And so I've learned over the years to look for fair. I think fair is really the way to go when it comes to the business arrangement. And I think that you can sleep better at night as well.
Right. Yeah. You might get over on somebody, as you said, but then do you really feel better, knowing that you treated them like that? Now, that said, there are obviously people who do. But those are not the people we want to have anything to do with.
And those aren't your listener, right? Those aren't your audience members. And it takes time, I think, especially if you perhaps are from an environment that is that was the norm, to perhaps learn some different techniques and different behaviors to integrate. I think, however, if we look at our own ethos, who we are as people, from the perspective of someone who is a leader who can serve well, I think the first part of that is understanding where we can come together and find
Mhm.
some common ground
Mhm.
and have shared purpose.
Right.
That shared purpose then defines the relationship moving
Mhm.
forward, whether we're buying a product, a service, or
Mhm.
even just being a good citizen.
Mhm. Right. Right. And it is hard, especially when you're starting out, to maybe say, you're not a good fit for me. I'm going to suggest you to somebody else. But the cool thing is then it's a win-win because you didn't, if you weren't wanting to do it, you weren't going to do 100%. You refer them to somebody else. If that works, then everybody's happy, right? But they also remember that. And they're going to refer back to you. They're going to say, nice things about you, all sorts of things like that. And so, it's okay to say, this just isn't a good fit, but here's who is.
It's really difficult. You're right. It's difficult, but it's important.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you're starting out
Mm-hmm.
and you see, okay, well, this is a revenue stream for
Mm-hmm.
me. However, if it's not in my wheelhouse and
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to do work
Mm-hmm.
that perhaps isn't going to be at the level
Mm-hmm.
of the expectation that
Mm-hmm.
I'm setting for the quality,
Mm-hmm.
it actually will end up being a worse situation.
Right. And then there's your reputation again.
There's your reputation because,
Mm-hmm.
oh wow, here's the work that you said you were going to
Mm-hmm.
do, and you didn't do it very well,
Mm-hmm.
and now you have negative
Mm-hmm.
reviews as opposed to saying, hey, this isn't just. And
Mm-hmm.
it actually happened to us years ago. I got a review, a 1-star review.
Oh no.
Can you believe it? And from someone, and of course, anytime we get any review, we
Mm-hmm.
want to give feedback,
Right.
and so.
Mm-hmm.
I called the location, one of our offices, and asked, "Hey, why did we get
Mm-hmm.
this 1-star review?" Well, this person called from Australia and asked us if they were an American citizen, but
Mm-hmm.
asked us if we can do a return for them,
Mm-hmm.
and we said we don't do those returns.
Mm-hmm.
And this person was obviously unhappy
Right.
about that and gave a review. So I contacted this
Mm-hmm.
person and I said, "Hey,
Hey.
hey, I'm the owner
Mm-hmm.
and of the income tax
Mm-hmm.
center, and we saw your review. I'd love to
Mm-hmm.
talk with you about it to
Mm-hmm.
understand really what happened."
Right.
And so absolutely said, fine, sure. Yeah, let's talk. I said, well, tell me more about the work that you wanted
Mm-hmm.
us to do. And so again, same
Mm-hmm.
conversation. I said,
Mm-hmm.
well, look at it like this. Imagine if you went into a foot doctor's
Mm-hmm.
office and you needed brain surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And would you expect or would you request for that foot doctor to do the
Right.
brain surgery? And
Mm-hmm.
he said, no, of course not. I said, well, what are
Mm-hmm.
all things that could go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could I could lose my life, I could
Mm-hmm.
lose my brain, all
Right.
these other.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing
Mm-hmm.
with us. We could
Right.
have said, hey, let's just take his
Yeah, we'll
money.
try.
Yeah, and do the best we can. We
Mm-hmm.
probably won't do a very good job,
Mm-hmm.
probably be a lot of mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
but we'd rather walk in integrity.
Mm-hmm.
We'd rather walk in a
Mm-hmm.
commitment to honor you as
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
taxpayer and not commit to doing
Mm-hmm.
something that would harm you potentially
Mm-hmm.
and would not be our very best.
Mm-hmm.
And and this person said, "Oh, I totally understand now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry." Now I had experience. I personally had experience in some international
Mm-hmm.
tax, and I did the work, and the review got changed to a 5-star
Yay. Mm-hmm.
praise report on
Mm-hmm.
that. But that speaks to the point you're
Mm-hmm.
making about walking in true
Mm-hmm.
integrity in what you
Mm-hmm.
promise and what you can deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, if you develop a reputation for that, you will draw in
Mm-hmm.
those people who are meant to be with you,
Right.
your avatar,
Mm-hmm.
your raving fan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of person you want to walk alongside
Mm-hmm.
of because that's the kind of work that's going to give you
Right.
meaning, going to
Mm-hmm.
give you value. It's going to be the kind of work that creates
Mm-hmm.
significance, massive
Mm-hmm.
contribution every day.
Right. Yeah, you're going to wake up Monday morning and go, "Yay, I get to go to work."
Yeah, absolutely. I get to do my best
Mm-hmm.
possible work for
Yeah.
the best
Mm-hmm.
possible scenario. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that you don't learn new ways,
Right.
learn
Mm-hmm.
new products or new
Mm-hmm.
systems or services. And that, of course, is all part of the experience
Mm-hmm.
in your business model,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't want to test it
Mm-hmm.
on your client.
Right. Right. And there's always hiccups. I mean, not everything goes exactly the way it should, but when you have a good relationship, then you can fix those hiccups. But if it was kind of shaky to start with, it's just going to get shakier.
Well, that's important too that you bring that up. And especially when you have a pilot program or
Mm-hmm.
trying something new, try it on those clients who you have a great relationship
Mm-hmm.
with
Right.
that will give you grace.
Mm-hmm.
We really recently launched in the
Mm-hmm.
last year a new tax planning program, advanced tax strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a brand new program. And so what we did, we invited clients who we knew and we had a great relationship with to help us to flesh out the kinks, right?
Right.
The challenges in it. We gave them a better deal, if you will, than what we would when we went full launch to the greater market. And they helped us to iron out, hey, we could be doing this a little bit different. Okay, the people need this more, because that's the whole part of discovery. In fact, when I define leadership, and it's been said that there's about as many definitions as leadership as there have been those who attempted to define, right? The leader, because it's so wide. But we know leadership. We can agree that leadership is about influence, but it's not just about influence, because as leaders, I believe that there's several components to our journey as a leader, and as a business, we're all leaders at some point. We're all leading. We're all creating and influencing in one way or another. And so I look at it like leadership has several components. One, it's about discovery. As leaders, we must be discovering and discovering where the future might go. And then from discovery, we move into influence and helping people to join us. And if we're going to be effective leaders, we need to move into achievement. We need to be achieving leaders. And it all revolves around shared purpose. So if I was going to define leadership, I would say the leadership is the discovery of, influence toward, and achievement of shared purpose. So a very rounded way to describe this journey, but always, and I say that to say it always starts with discovery. We've got to be in discovery before we can influence, and then we can move into achievement. And if we ever get to a point to where we're having difficulty influencing, perhaps I can't get the sale, or perhaps my team member isn't jiving with some of the work that we need to do, then I got to go back to discovery. Go back to discovery and discover, okay, well, where am I missing it? Where are there, perhaps maybe my communication is not effective. Maybe my vision isn't clear. Maybe there's other issues with the process or the context, and really begin to assess and analyze how I can make a change.
Right. And one of the things that I think is absolutely critical in that process is that you're looking inward and not what was, it's your fault. No, what did I need to do differently? Now, sometimes it is, okay, it just wasn't going to work. But in many cases it is, I didn't communicate well, or whatever it is, but it's got to be an inward look.
Yes. We call that, when we look at self-efficacy and we look at the internal versus external scenarios, and we want to start internally, look at my own behavior, look at my own the challenges I may be facing. If a team member perhaps is struggling in an area, perhaps I've given them the kind of responsibility that perhaps needed a little more training.
Right.
Perhaps the process was not clear. It's been said that people don't feel processes do, and so understanding, maybe there's an aspect of the process that needs to be revised or revisited, and so looking at that with some level of humility, I think is essential for leaders. We have to walk in humility. I love the way Jim Collins described it when he described what he called level 5 leaders. Of course, he said they were ambitious, and it goes without saying. However, he said that they were this blend, if you will, of professional will and personal humility. And it's a wonderful combination, because we have to have the will and resolve to work hard and do the and do the work. At the same time, walk in the kind of humility that says, I don't always get it right, and I can learn and grow. And be a part of the process in making this a better place through my own introspection.
Right. Which is a big part, I'm assuming, of Great Summit leadership. So tell us more about that, and then we're really going to dive into that.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So several years ago, I began this next step in the evolution of my own contribution to the leadership sphere. Of course, my PhD is in leadership studies, specifically entrepreneurial business leadership, specifically vision formation, vision operationalization in entrepreneurial leaders. That
was an interesting thesis, I bet.
Oh, yeah. So my dissertation was on visionary leadership, specifically Milton Hershey, Walt Disney, and Steve Jobs.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, so I studied the patterns that developed in their leadership journey from the time they were born to the time they died, and looking at what we could uncover on different ways that we can create our own vision as leaders in business. And so taking that research, taking that journey, and then moving it into the leadership sphere to begin to have mastermind groups, coaching, have workshops that really focus on developing the leader to be most effective, both personally and professionally. So we've been doing that, been having a lot of fun. We're about 4 years in, and doing very immersive leadership development journeys. So we do these retreats and we go on site. We focus on exceptionalism and leadership, and we begin to identify and uncover it and apply it in our own lives.
Right. And I think it's so important to note that leader, in many cases, has nothing to do with job title, right?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because, leadership comes from a position of, a lot of people think power is negative. Of course, we need power to power this conversation, right? So power is not necessarily a negative thing, but it's a function of leadership. In fact, one of my colleagues described it like this: said, power produces influence, and leadership is the capacity to leverage that influence into action. So power and then influence and leadership. And so you don't have to have a title to move into action. That's really what leaders do. Leaders are able to affect change, right? They're change agents, because you don't need change. You don't need leaders. You don't need someone to lead you somewhere if you're just staying in the same place. However, so, you've got different kinds of leaders, and one is what we call an assigned leader. An assigned leader is someone with a title. The president of the United States.
You're the manager, you're the owner, the president.
Correct. And then you have what we call emergent leaders. Emergent leaders are people who aren't necessarily a title, but they have influence based on different types of power mechanisms. So, for example, there's a number of there's many power mechanisms, but some of them are expert power. Okay, so you can have an expertise. You don't necessarily have a title, but you have an expertise.
Right.
And in my accounting and advisory firm, we have lots of accountants, but that title doesn't necessarily give you influence. It's really the capability based on your expertise that gives you influence, because when someone comes and sits down and says, "Hey, I got a letter from the IRS," your expertise will influence people.
I don't want to know what your title is. I want to know you can fix this.
That's right. I could care less. You could be, head janitor. Can you help me get out of this mess I'm in? And so that doesn't. So what's interesting about what you say is you can lead anywhere, and anyone can lead.
Right.
If you've ever watched the movie Ratatouille, it's one of the Pixar movies, and it's about this cooking and this rat that's a cook, and there's a chef who's a kind of a ghost chef, and he writes a book. It's called Anyone Can Cook, and so it's the same thing with anyone can lead. And so that leadership doesn't require you to have a formal title. It simply requires you to have an understanding of a better future state, and be able to have the influence to lead someone to a better future state. Because here's the thing about leadership, and you talk about the president. We're in an election cycle at the time of our conversation, and so people are always asking, how do I determine who I'm going to vote for? And I think some of the questions people ask in this situation is, one, does the person who I'm considering voting for, do they know where they're going?
Right.
That's really important. And the second question we ask is, do we want to go there?
Right. Yeah.
And so, that's very basic questions, but the same thing in any leadership. If someone is going someplace, they can help you. And here's the other thing is I look at leadership as we are guides. We provide access to a place people generally couldn't go unless they were with us to guide them.
Okay.
Uncharted territory. So in some ways, leaders are we're liberators, because people are in a position that's not, the current state is not ideal. Right. And we want to move people into a more ideal state. So whatever it is, whether you're selling a product, like we talked about with taxes, right? Not an ideal state. They want to be in a better state. Whether it's a daycare service that you're running, whether it's you're selling vacuum cleaners, whatever it is.
Right.
If you can help me overcome my problems. In other words, that's another thing about leadership. Leadership is really helping people to solve their problems.
Mm-hmm.
And that's back to our original piece of conversation, which is you going from adversary to ally. You're
Mm-hmm.
adversarial because you want to take my time and my money. But if
Mm-hmm.
you can solve my problems, help
Mm-hmm.
me to solve my
Right.
problems. Your value proposition
Yeah.
rises
I'll
dramatically.
give you my time and money.
Yes, because you're my ally.
Mm-hmm.
I need you now.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to be that person. You want to be the person who's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you become that person? You develop influence. How do you develop
Mm-hmm.
influence? You develop expertise. You
Mm-hmm.
develop value. You, you
Mm-hmm.
you help people to solve it. You understand. And this is back to some of the things that we've learned over the years with
Mm-hmm.
the servant leadership model.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different approaches to leadership, but servant leadership
Mm-hmm.
has some components that really feed into this because
Mm-hmm.
servant leadership has different pillars, if you will. And two
Mm-hmm.
of the pillars that were described many years ago by Larry Spears as he explained Robert Greenleaf's composition
Mm-hmm.
on servant leadership. He said, there's you have to be you truly have to want to listen.
Mm-hmm.
You have to want to and be an active listener because you can't
Mm-hmm.
understand what people's problems are unless you cleared the noise, you cleared the
Mm-hmm.
distractions, you started listening. And then from
Mm-hmm.
listening, you have to be empathetic. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have to like care, like, okay, I understand and I want to be a part
Mm-hmm.
of the journey to find healing for you
Mm-hmm.
where you might be burdened.
Right. Right. And so many people think empathy is not a good thing. It's a lot of people, it's a feminine trait, right? And no, the best leaders obviously do have empathy. Now, you can't get caught up in it. And because there is a point where if you have too much empathy, you can't function, right? You just get so involved in everybody's problems and things like that. So, but you have to understand that they've come to you probably because there is a problem, and so you have to at least say, I understand.
That's it. Yeah. In fact, this might surprise you, but I was not always an empathetic person. My wife, thank goodness for my wife, as
Mm-hmm.
she has helped me over the years,
Mm-hmm.
over the last quarter century,
Mm-hmm.
to become
Mm-hmm.
more empathetic. So if someone's listening, say, "I'm not empathetic."
Mm-hmm.
You can change. I can
Yes. Mm-hmm.
change.
Yeah.
You can change. And so the beauty of
Mm-hmm.
empathy is meeting someone where they are
Mm-hmm.
and expressing, "Hey, I care about your
Mm-hmm.
situation."
Right.
And that caring then moves you
Mm-hmm.
forward, right? You don't want to stay, as you mentioned, you want to
Mm-hmm.
stay in this position of, oh, I'm just going to hold you and hug you forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that. It's okay. Hey, you know what? I care.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Because people want to be heard. They want to
Mm-hmm.
be validated. They want
Right.
to be valued.
Mm-hmm.
And so saying that with sincerity,
Mm-hmm.
with genuinity. And if you don't, here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
You might say, well, I really don't care. Why would I, I may not,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do that disingenuously. Well, that's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't care, I'm going to tell you this, someone else who does care will likely earn their
Right.
business.
Right.
So there's someone out there
Mm-hmm.
who so learn to care. And if you don't care, you might be in the wrong business
Mm-hmm.
altogether.
Well, and we as the consumer or, whatever, we know when they don't care, right?
Correct. I'll give you an example, and I had mentioned Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve Jobs was he was a prickly guy, I guess, in
Mm-hmm.
some ways. And
Right.
so internally with business, he was very kind of hard-nosed
Mm-hmm.
and he's changed a lot over the years. But
Mm-hmm.
however, he cared deeply, and I mean deeply
Mm-hmm.
and intimately about the user experience,
Mm-hmm.
your experience
Right.
as an end user.
Mm-hmm.
He lived
Mm-hmm.
to create an experience for
Mm-hmm.
you that would amplify. He said,
Mm-hmm.
my goal is to amplify the human mind
Mm-hmm.
and give you these products
Mm-hmm.
that were that had not only
Mm-hmm.
function and form, but were enjoyable
Mm-hmm.
to use. And you felt that.
Mm-hmm.
You knew that he truly did
Mm-hmm.
care and and truly had
Mm-hmm.
empathy because he believed many products
Mm-hmm.
in this area of technology that he
Mm-hmm.
was involved in were subpar.
Right.
And he had empathy for the
Mm-hmm.
experience because he also
Mm-hmm.
experienced. One of the reasons why
Mm-hmm.
he went forward with the iPhone was because he believed that, as he would say, all the phones that were out there
Mm-hmm.
were subpar.
Mm-hmm.
They were crappy.
Right.
And so he wanted you to
Mhm.
have something that was truly
Mhm.
remarkable.
Right.
And so he connected with people
Mhm.
individually, even though he never met
Mhm.
them.
Right.
And you think about it. Think about even when he died in 2011.
Mhm.
People were put, you may, I don't know if you remember this or not, but people were putting shrines up
Mhm.
around the world
Right.
for a
Mhm.
person who they'd never met.
Mhm.
But because of how he
Mhm.
individually impacted their
Mhm.
lives through this true
Mhm.
empathy of their
Mhm.
situation.
Well,
Powerful.
and of course, the really interesting part about that is he was able to charge a lot more,
A
right?
premium.
For
A
everything.
premium.
I mean, I'm sitting here looking at my iPhone. Now, I don't have one of the fancy ones because I will not bring myself to pay $1,000 for a phone. But we have our iPads. We have, I mean, I long ago, I used an SE, right?
Well, you
And the
probably
little
use a
cubey
BlackBerry
thing.
even before that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and all of these things. But yeah, because people understood that he knew what we wanted, we were fine with paying more to get it.
Yeah. In fact, I have right here on my wall
Mm-hmm.
some of these original phones, and you may remember this
Oh
Star Trek
yes, uh-huh,
phone here,
uh-huh.
this
Little
Motorola.
Motorola, it looks
Here's
like. Yep.
a Sony phone here.
Mm-hmm.
This was revolutionary. This was
Oh
a
yeah.
little tiny little arm there,
Uh-huh.
and so this is what was going on at the
Mm-hmm.
time. You can only imagine. Of course, there was the BlackBerry and some of the
Mm-hmm.
handhelds
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot, but this is where Steve Jobs said,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, we can do better. We can do
Right.
better because people need better.
Mm-hmm.
They deserve better."
Mm-hmm.
And so by applying that same philosophy
Mm-hmm.
to our own journey,
Mm-hmm.
we create better value
Mm-hmm.
for our own
Mm-hmm.
contribution in people's lives.
Right. And there are always going to be people who price is the overriding factor. That's okay. That's why there's Walmart. Um, you know.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if do you remember when some of the early Apple computers came out,
Mm-hmm.
and even in the 90s. I'll just shoot at the 90s because maybe some listeners might remember that better. And then
Mm-hmm.
the Mac
The
iMac.
Max. Yep.
The
Mm-hmm.
iMacs came out
Mm-hmm.
and they were these cool colors and they
Uh-huh.
big balls.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we couldn't afford that.
Mm-hmm.
We were Commodore people because
Mm-hmm.
we could only afford a
Or
Commodore
Gateway,
VIC-20.
right?
Right. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
different, and that's important because pick your demographic.
Mm-hmm.
Pick your lane, pick your
Mm-hmm.
avatar
Right.
because it's important not to try to serve
Mm-hmm.
everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been said the riches are in the niches,
Mm-hmm.
to really focus on like who is my
Mm-hmm.
ideal client
Right.
and how can I best serve that
Mm-hmm.
ideal client.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we don't really know how to even go about that, but I think
Mm-hmm.
some of the first questions are, who do I absolutely love working with and
Mm-hmm.
who do I absolutely abhor working with? Like
Right.
who is it when my phone rings that I'm like, oh, I don't want to get it? Or who is it
Uh-huh.
that rings and I'm like, I can't wait to talk with you, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Who is getting the most value
Mm-hmm.
out of this
Mm-hmm.
exchange called business?
Mm-hmm.
And that will likely be your ideal
Mm-hmm.
client avatar. So
Right.
then dissecting, okay, what are their behaviors? What are their patterns?
Mm-hmm.
What are their income? What
Mm-hmm.
are their needs?
Mm-hmm.
And then to be able to then utilize it
Mm-hmm.
and reverse engineer it to say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is my ideal client.
Right.
And that also will create a better, more cohesive
Mm-hmm.
environment. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're a solo entrepreneur and then eventually you move into where you need
Mm-hmm.
other people. When I started, it was just me. I
Mm-hmm.
hired my best buddy, and I was like, oh, now
Mm-hmm.
I've got an employee.
Right.
But early on, I realized, oh my goodness, there's as you get your
Mm-hmm.
reputation, as your reputation builds for
Mm-hmm.
excellence, you get more clients,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have more clients, then
Mm-hmm.
you can personally
Mm-hmm.
serve their needs because you only have finite
Mm-hmm.
number of hours per day. So then you begin to expand.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you expand, you get more employees, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're not just a solo entrepreneur. Then you
Mm-hmm.
become a manager and a leader and all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you may not, you may hire people for that. And at the same time, I think it's so important to remember, okay, how did we get here?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the people who are ideal clients who
Mm-hmm.
got us here? And how do we make sure that the team continues to
Mm-hmm.
focus on those ideals?
Right. And back to talking about Steve Jobs. Now I'm definitely going to show my age on this one. One of the first business books that I ever really remember reading just to read was Guy Kawasaki's The Macintosh Way, right? And in it, he talked about the employee culture, you know, and I mean, this was revolutionary at the time. Like, you know, one of the things they talked about was they had, you know, in their atrium area, the grand piano with a person who sat there and played. And, you know, and they had, you know, an orange juice bar. I mean, all sorts of stuff. See, I mean, and it's been a really long time since I read that. So the fact that I remember that, but for them, it was so important that employees loved going to work.
Indeed, yeah, and I'm glad you brought up culture. Sometimes people say, "Oh, culture." It's, you know, even the word's just a fad word. It's
Mm-hmm.
not. Your culture is really an outpouring
Mm-hmm.
of your mission,
Mm-hmm.
of your vision,
Mm-hmm.
of your values.
Right.
That's what creates
Mm-hmm.
the norms, if
Mm-hmm.
you will,
Mm-hmm.
the behaviors, and this is what we're talking about, the reputation, really.
Mm-hmm.
So your culture has massive impact
Mm-hmm.
on everyone's experience. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what leadership is.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in the experience
Mm-hmm.
business, whether we're sales leaders,
Mm-hmm.
whether we're management leaders, whether we're guidance
Mm-hmm.
counselors leading, if we're in the military
Mm-hmm.
leadership, if we're in public service
Mm-hmm.
or the politics.
Mm-hmm.
We're really here to create an experience
Mm-hmm.
that's exceptional. And
Right.
raising that bar. So here's the thing about culture that's super cool. And the especially in the Apple days, there we as leaders, we have the opportunity to choose where we set the bar
Mm-hmm.
in our culture. We
Right.
can set it low, the standard.
Mm-hmm.
We can set it high. And whatever that standard is, that's where the top level of what people will generally work to achieve. By
Mm-hmm.
the way, if we set it low, we're never going to be able to attract the A players who
Right.
want that
Because
high
they've
bar.
gone somewhere else.
Correct. So, as in the Apple days, the Jobs set that bar and that standard so incredibly high that it was electrifying
Mm-hmm.
how much stimulation,
Mm-hmm.
intellectual stimulation. This is actually one of the tenets of
Mm-hmm.
the transformational leadership
Mm-hmm.
model. It stimulates people because they challenge the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Jobs was constantly asking his
Mm-hmm.
team members in this culture of achievement,
Mm-hmm.
when they present something to him and say, "Here's this new graphic user interface," or
Mm-hmm.
"Here's this new piece to the Mac," or whatever it might
Mm-hmm.
be, he would ask him, "Is this your best work?"
Mm-hmm.
And if they're going to be honest, they'd say, "Yes, maybe, not really. I can do better." He would
Mm-hmm.
tell them to go back,
Mm-hmm.
take it back.
Right.
I
And
want
he
your
wasn't mad at them. He was encouraging them.
Yeah, and yes, and sometimes though he would be
He'd be a little disappointed,
he
right?
would, he would
Dad
be,
was disappointed.
yeah, he would be he would not be the nicest guy.
Yeah,
At the
yeah.
same
You know,
time,
you didn't want to cross him. You know, that was one of the things. But he also was very effusive in his praise. You know, when you made him happy, you knew you made him happy.
yeah, and you had to know how to talk with him.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Ive was one of his lead
Mm-hmm.
engineers for many years, as
Mm-hmm.
when he came back to Apple post
Mm-hmm.
97. And Johnny was he was very intentional and
Mm-hmm.
very deliberate and discerning in how he approached jobs, especially
Mm-hmm.
with the new product designs,
Mm-hmm.
when it was working on the iPad and so
Mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
And he found they were very good relationship. And that's the other thing
Mm-hmm.
about leadership, is that leadership isn't always top down.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's bottom up. And what I
Right.
mean by that, and it's sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when we are a subordinate to
Mm-hmm.
a boss or CEO or
Mm-hmm.
someone along those lines, we have influence too to
Mm-hmm.
help shape their decisions
Mm-hmm.
in their leadership when it's
Mm-hmm.
appropriate. I think it's important to recognize that as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. And of course, a good culture encourages that.
Correct.
You know, you don't want to be the person that's low man on the totem pole, knowing you're going to get fired if you say, "Excuse me." Right.
Well, it's true. In fact, there's stories of especially cultural
Mm-hmm.
nuances, and I used to teach class on business, and we
Mm-hmm.
had an international business section, and understanding what different nuances are in business. For example, in the East Asian region, there are and have been difficulty in a boss, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, asking for an appraisal or feedback from a subordinate because it's considered dishonoring.
Right. Yes.
Tell your boss that they could do better in a certain area.
Right.
And so stories are an American business person, a division goes to another country and says, well, here's our appraisal system. I appraise you and you appraise me. And the employee who's not used to that kind of culture, not accustomed to it, will feel great shame. Oh my goodness, what is it that I've done for me to be shamed into doing this? So we have to be really also mindful and conscientious about people entering into a culture like that. I love to have a safe space, transparent environment where we can all share without any kind of retribution for simply sharing best practices. If there's a way that I can improve as a leader, I want to hear that feedback from all levels. But you have to make sure that people believe and understand that this is a safe space and that it is part of our growth together to own that.
Right. But ultimately, you're the person who makes the decision. Or whoever. And I think that's the thing too, is sometimes we get so caught up in the feedback and let's support everybody loop that then nothing gets done.
That's right. Yeah, you have to take action. And the thing about leadership and action is that once you take an action to go one direction, and that's the direction that you've chosen, you can't go in every direction at once.
Right.
So choose a lane.
You have to say no to some things.
That's right. You have to do that. Choose your lane. And that doesn't mean that you don't evaluate, that you don't modify.
Right.
Of course, business is fluid. Leadership is fluid. Contexts are constantly changing. Settings are changing. And so it's up to us to be fluid enough, yet directional enough so that we can keep our leadership on course.
Right. I love it. Well, I want to go back and talk more about servant leadership, because I think that is something that more and more people are truly realizing the importance of it. And maybe it is because it's a political year. But it's, we won't go down that path, right? But, I think it is, but we've seen servant leaders forever. A lot of times we do think of them along the lines of, say, a religious overtone, but it's not. That's just kind of part of it. So what does make servant leadership different?
Great question. Yeah. So initially, and I need to go back to the 1970s, of course, 1970. So we're talking 50.
I was a wee little person. I was around, but
I was a thought until 73 anyway. So Robert Greenleaf, who really coined the term servant leadership from a business perspective. We, of course, as you mentioned, from religion, and,
right? Yeah, Gandhi, all of that.
Right. We've seen so many ideals, if you will, or representations, symbols, if you will, of servant leadership in those contexts. However, in business, we didn't really approach it until that time from the 1970s. So Greenleaf, who was actually a Quaker, another religious figure, and the Quakers were interesting because they helped to really fuel the idea to abolish slavery in the United States, the first groups to look at that. And so he was very conscientious about the human condition. And so he saw this disparage in how organizations operate, and people were very expendable in the organizational sense, because as you think about the triangle, the leaders are at the top of the triangle, and then everyone at the bottom is the disposable.
Right.
And so where the servant leader had a much different approach to the leadership model, rather than looking at it as a triangle, we look at it as a tree. And so at the bottom of the tree, of course, what do we have? We have roots at the bottom of the tree, and the soil nourishes them. So leaders are actually the nourishers. They're at the bottom of the tree, nourishing.
They're feeding.
They're feeding and nourishing with the resources necessary, so that as you get up into the branches, and the people who are doing the heavy lifting and the labor part of this business are providing the fruit, if it's a fruit tree, so that all of your end users, your clients, your customers can enjoy that fruit. well, they need to be nourished. And so they need to be provided with all the resources necessary so that they can then give the best possible work. So this is the opposite approach. Really, it's completely the antithesis of so much of how we had business minded throughout, throughout the ages, if you will. And I love the way Greenleaf describes the servant leader. So I'm gonna just read this quote, which I think is so eloquent and beautiful in how he talks about it. He says this quote: "The servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve. Then conscientious choices brings one to aspire to lead. The best test is, do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? And what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit or at least not be further deprived?" End quote. What an interesting, beautiful way to describe this servant leader. And so it's a very attractive model, because who doesn't want their team members, whether it's in a business, whether it's a family, whether it's in a community or culture, who doesn't want them to be healthier,
and to thrive?
Yes. All of those things. So really that's the heart of the servant leader. And so you can say, oh, isn't this kind of like touchy-feely and and weak, because aren't leaders supposed to be strong?
We're supposed to be General Patton, right?
Right. However, I believe that the greatest strength is in the transparency and vulnerability to serve alongside, because I believe titles are simply different roles and responsibilities. And so even in the organizations that I've founded and built, I didn't build them alone. I built them with the help of others who also believe in the worthy causes, that we are arm in arm. And simply, I make different decisions than they do because of my role and my expertise and my giftings. So it doesn't mean that I'm weak because I'm a servant leader. In fact, it's just the opposite. It's that I'm focused on giving my team members all of the best possible resources they need to thrive in their space. Talk about culture, right? Think about that as a culture. If you're listening or you're watching, think about the culture that you would be attracted to if someone said, I want you, not only want you, but I'm going to create an environment to where you are freer, wiser, more autonomous, healthier, where you can truly thrive in your genius. Who wouldn't want that?
Right. So are there drawbacks to being a servant leader?
There's drawbacks to everything, I guess, in some ways, if it's not used properly.
Right.
So I believe that servant leadership certainly has its strengths in the ability to focus on the individual needs. I think that if someone overemphasizes individual needs, it can draw away from the collective efforts. If someone overemphasizes perhaps individual situations, it can create an idea of favoritism, or perhaps people seem as though they have they're treated specially, if you will. So we want to make sure that we're mindful of that, and that we're not creating an organization that overemphasizes individual needs over the really the greater mission.
Right.
And I believe that there's no one person who is greater than the mission of the organization, including myself, by the way, as the founder of the mission. And so I'm not above the law, if you will. And so I think when we're healthy and we're focused on servant leadership from that perspective, we can mitigate those types of issues.
Right. Yeah. We see, going down a way we shouldn't be going.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting. I was thinking of Star Trek, with Spock. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one.
Yeah. That's it. At the same time, the one is important when we can meet the needs of the one in the context of the greater mission.
Right. I love it. Well, oh my gosh, we've only got about 5 minutes left. This has been such a great discussion. We just need to do more of this. I can see the philosophy background, and yeah, that's in there.
It comes out.
It does, it does. But as you said at the very start, it is all part of this. If we're just focused on, say, being the general patent type of leader, sure, people follow us, but they follow us because they're afraid. And then the first time they jump. But we also have to be ready to say, okay, the buck is going to stop here. I'm getting my political or my historical stuff out of the way here, right? But yeah, so tell us a little bit more about what it is and and how to find you and what are the services that you provide.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. So we have several different opportunities within our realm. Of course, we have advisory work we do for business owners, and we have of course our tax and accounting division as well. So we've got we've got a lot of like planning that we do for folks, whether it be business optimization,
Right.
whether it be tax
Because
planning.
that's got to be in there.
It's got to be in there. Yeah. Look, nobody wants to pay more than what they have to the government, but there's a lot that goes into tax planning because it's not just planning for reducing my tax burden. Of course, people want that and entity optimization and whatnot. They also want to plan for, hey, efficiencies. How can I be more efficient from a financial perspective? How can I have all my insurances, my estate plan? We don't do that.
We want to grow.
Yeah, we want to scale the organization. We want to do all those things, and it takes so many different components to that. Of course, we have fractional CFOs, and we have consultants and business advisors, and people to help along the way, as well as the leadership component, as I had mentioned about Great Summit and our leadership model for our entrepreneurs that we focus on these cohorts, if you will, that propel them into being more effective leaders, holistic leaders, not just from the business perspective, but from the personal perspective, because leadership, if we don't have our home in order, it's likely that our business is gonna not function as well, and so on and so forth. So looking at it from holistic perspectives and being able to help people really live fully, really. You know this just as well as I do. Every moment, every day, someone has their unexpected last moment. Someone right now is having a moment that's their last moment, whether it's expected or unexpected. So if that's the case, and we know that to be true, then the only time this side of eternity is this that we're guaranteed is this very moment. At the next very moment, I could be, it could be over for a day. Say, wow, I just interviewed him and he's gone. So helping people to understand that, not to live in a miserable perspective. Oh no,
state of fear.
Yeah. But to live in a state of liberation, to say, how am I maximizing the value of these moments? Every moment that I'm given, because I believe the present is called that because it's a gift.
Right.
And it's a gift in the moment. So I want to help people to really truly live in freedom in every single moment they have as they explore their leadership journey, whether it's for one moment or for it's the next 50 years.
Right. I love it. And you're active on LinkedIn and so all sorts of different ways to find you.
Oh yeah. Look up Nate Salah. Just look up the name, and you'll find me on LinkedIn. You'll find the podcast. You'll find our advisory and accounting work and the Income Tax Center. You'll easy to find us on any of those and any of those ways. Just the internet is amazing to find.
I love it. Well, and on your website, and we'll link to Great Summit Leadership in the call notes. There's so much great information there, and it talks about your classes and all sorts of things. So definitely check that out.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a labor of love, and we want to just really go from one to many. The podcast is a great way. We've got over 200 episodes, not nearly as many as you.
I know we're going to hit the 4 digits.
That's right. And so, but as you know, having this medium gives people an opportunity to check in without having to pay. It's free.
Right. I love it. Well, we do only have just a couple minutes left, and I do hope to have you on again. But do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Well, it's such a pleasure to be with you, Deb. And I think that if I was going to leave anyone with the final thoughts that I thought would be relevant, it would be to just be that. Be relevant. And I believe that business can be summed up, effective business can be summed up in 5 words: solve relevant problems with excellence. If we can be problem solvers, that are relevant, if we can do it with excellence and not just the problems that our clients have, but our problems that we have internally, then we can truly, truly thrive in business and in life.
I love it. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having a delightful discussion with Dr. Nate Salah. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.